Welcome, everyone, to the Country Club Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, Leo McMahon. Today, it's our pleasure to have Nick Callaway as our guest. Nick is from CBIZ Weeks in Callaway. It's an insurance company. Welcome, Nick.
Morning or good evening, Leo. Great to see you, my man.
It's morning in Florida and evening in Thailand. It's great having you, Nick. And it's good to see you again. I haven't seen you in a while, and it's good to see your smiling face.
Yeah, it's great to see
Uh,
you, man. Glad you're
to
doing
get
well.
to get us rolling, Nick, can you describe for the viewers who is CBIZ Callaway and Weeks? Or Weeks and Callaway. I'm sorry, and just tell us about your company.
Yeah, I'll give a background. There's really two sections of that. I'll start with the Weeks and Callaway piece. So naturally, probably from my baby face, you can guess that I'm not the founder of Weeks and Callaway. That was my father, Mike Callaway. So Dad's story is a pretty cool example of the American dream. Growing up, his father had a concrete company, and he was the second son. So he was very welcome to come into the business, but it always seemed clear that my uncle would be the one that would take over. So Dad, as probably about an early teenager or so, went around his neighborhood and just figured out who's the most successful parents of my friends. And he had a buddy whose dad owned an insurance agency in Delray Beach. So from an early age, Dad said, I'm going to go start my own insurance company. And I believe he was about 20 years old and
Really?
opened Callaway Insurance above his grandmother's dress shop on Atlantic Avenue in
Wow.
Delray, and just started hitting the phones, hitting the streets, using his connections and selling some insurance. And so then he had a handful of years where he bounced around, partnered with a few people. And then Lee Weeks was a good friend of his, and Lee Weeks' father had started Weeks and Associates back in 1954. So Dad joined in with Weeks and Associates, and in 1985 it became Weeks and Callaway. And so then they ran Weeks and Callaway for about 30 years. And then in 2014 is when CBIZ partnered with Weeks and Callaway, and the two organizations merged. So CBIZ is a very large professional service company. We've got tax, accounting, human capital management, you name it. And so acquiring Weeks and Callaway was their avenue into property and casualty insurance down in South Florida. So that's a kind of brief backstory of how CBIZ Weeks and Callaway really started. And then specific to golf courses, Dad was a member of a club in Delray, and they had some insurance issues. So he reviewed it, was able to take over and place the account, and realized that there weren't too many people that had specialized in country clubs specifically. And so he realized that that could be a good avenue for him to specialize in, both for his own business interests of running his own insurance agency and being able to help the club industry. So he eventually partnered with the Florida Club Managers Association, where eventually Weeks and Callaway became a diamond partner of this FLCMAA. And then kind of the rest is history. It's about 20 years now of being specialized in golf and country clubs. And 20 years ago, I was in elementary school. So it's not me that started it. I'm second gen that has a great opportunity to kind of carry on Dad's legacy.
That's a great story. Great story about your father. 20 years old, he started an insurance business. That's incredible. Incredible.
Yeah, pretty badass stuff, to be honest with you. I can't imagine when I was 20 years old, I was just a sophomore in college up at University of Florida. Could not imagine running a company. Dad got married pretty young too and had a couple kids. And so when he was in my shoes as a 28-year-old, he had his own company, had two kids that he was providing dinner for, had a wife. Pretty remarkable stuff when I factor just how busy and how much I do without those responsibilities.
Wow.
So really cool stuff. And so then for me, I'm the youngest of four kids, and my older siblings, for different reasons, didn't really see insurance as an interest of theirs. So I was about 14 years old when I decided that being a pro football quarterback or an NBA basketball player probably wasn't realistic for at the time 5'6", maybe a little tubby middle schooler, and started talking to Dad more seriously about insurance as a career for me, working with him at Weeks and Callaway. And so pretty much from that point on, every life and career decision I made was based around doing this. So the high school I went to had an entrepreneurship program. So I got some experience at a younger age, just doing some business. And then the one decision that probably could have been questioned is I knew I wanted to do risk management, and the University of Florida does not offer a single course in insurance.
Wow.
Pretty unique, but the real reason for that is Florida State, our in-state rival, has a very exceptional insurance program for risk management, as well as the University of Georgia, our SEC rivals, have a fantastic risk management program. So I was sitting there with a decision of, do I go to one of these rival schools that have the exact degree that I'm looking for, or do I become the fourth of Dad's four kids to go to the University of Florida, where I've been rooting since I was a little kid, going to games in the swamp? So I made the call to go to UF, did my 5 years up there, and no regrets at all, because what that really did was allow me that if for any reason insurance wasn't something that was an interest of mine, my degrees were in marketing, and then I did a master's of international business. And so I got business experience that wasn't entirely specific to insurance.
Right.
And fortunately, there was a large insurance company, Tower Hill, that's based in Gainesville, where UF is. So I was able to get an internship there that became
great.
a job for about a year and a half.
Great.
And so then that gave me some insurance background and the understanding that it was an industry that interested me. So got my degree, finished up at Tower Hill, and then a month after graduating, started working with Dad at CBIZ.
That's another great story. So I'm just thinking now, you know a lot about insurance. Your father knows a ton about insurance. But the reason I like doing business with you, you're both nice people. You know, really nice people. You were always answer the call whenever I called up with questions. You were always patient with me because I don't know anything about insurance. And you guys were always patient and kind and respectful, and I appreciated it, you know, because I'm sure some of the questions I asked you were pretty simple, but they weren't simple to me, you know. So starting out on that, I'm thinking we talked before the podcast. We want to try to help some people in a similar situation that I was in when I first started talking with you. And how can we communicate to them at a real third grade level, let's say? So if I'm the golf professional at a club, give me an example of something I should be concerned about in regards to insurance.
Because I don't want anybody getting too nitty gritty with insurance details, but it's a pretty complex industry. When I was first getting into it, a lot of people referred to it in its own language, where if you've never studied that language, how would you know how to speak it?
Exactly.
And so for a golf pro, a good example would be the golf carts themselves. Most clubs have some type of golf cart agreement in place for the users of a golf cart. Private clubs, the members is a little bit more protected because you know all the people, but semi-private or any club has guests too. And so that membership agreement for the club pro would be a good example of something that you'd want to just have awareness to and understand what it means and why you have it in the first place. With insurance, the real goal is that nothing ever happens and you don't need to know what was on that golf cart agreement. But then if a guest drives it into a tree and then people are trying to figure out who's going to pay for that golf cart and its damage, who's going to pay for any injuries that happened, having that agreement in place, understanding what was there is really important for a pro.
So is the agreement, let's say at a private club, is the agreement signed when you take the membership, or is it signed every time you go out to play?
For a private club, doing it with the membership is the smoothest because you don't want to have your members having to sign a piece of paper every time they go out.
Right.
But then with guests, and kind of varies, a lot of clubs will have it as part of the sign-up process. But there is some challenge with that if the guest never saw what they were agreeing to. And the best practice would probably be having some type of receipt that shows what that risk transfer is. We work with some semi-private clubs, so that's much more important. And so reviewing that language is important to make sure that we understand whose responsibility something is. And it's the club's discretion to decide that. Do you want to transfer all of the risk over to the user of the golf cart? Does the club want to retain that risk as an offering to their membership?
Yeah, I'm just thinking I was at Lost City for over 5 years. And in that short time, we had at least 3 golf cart accidents.
Mhm.
So anyway, that's good advice. That's good
Yeah,
advice.
the way Dad used to phrase it was protecting your insurance, because when you buy all these policies, they're in place to protect the club. So if anything goes wrong and the club receives a lawsuit, that's where you file it with your general liability carrier. But another piece of it is you want to keep your insurance expenses as low as possible. I'm sure at Lost City, it was one of your bigger single line items. You got payroll is probably one of the highest, but next in line was probably insurance or pretty close to it.
Right.
And when you have activity, that's what shoots up your premiums, because the carriers that are accepting your risk are saying, oh, wow, at Club ABC, they have 3 golf cart incidents a year. There probably isn't very good controls in place.
Right. So moving on, if I'm the chef, give me an example of some insurance that I might have to have a need for in the future.
Yeah, so like with the chef, a good one, and you could really, for a club, use this in any department, is understanding your employees themselves. The club buys workers' compensation insurance to protect any injuries, but you can do a lot to prevent those injuries from happening in the first place. For instance, if you've got one of your line cooks that are chopping vegetables for that evening's meals, do they have a glove on that protects their hand that's holding the vegetables so that they're not cutting their fingers? Because you chop a finger off, best case scenario is you're at the hospital quick enough to reattach it, but it's going to be a large claim that's then going to be on your loss experience for a while. So doing those kind of training and safety measures for a chef, obviously his main focus is making a great meal for the membership, but you don't want to have those kind of issues. And then you can really get some positive benefits from that when your staff recognizes that you care about them and them not getting hurt. They should be more committed to the club itself, and for the chef to his mentorship and advices on how we want to make this meal.
It's interesting you touched on that. When I was there, again, a short 5 years, we had a pretty big, one individual had a pretty big workman's comp claim. Other than that, we didn't have too many, but that one was a pretty big one. Now, if I'm the food and beverage manager and I have all the servers and bartenders under me, what would be an example of insurance helping them out?
Something we've seen pretty often is special event nights at different clubs where there's, say it's Mardi Gras, and so you've got a lot of New Orleans themed stuff throughout the clubhouse. And maybe the typical walkways are blocked off because there's a big obstruction of some kind of entertainment. We've seen a lot of injuries where members trip and fall because they're trying to navigate through those to get over back to wherever their table is. Most people want to take the shortest path, and if they have to step over some wires, they'll do it. And so that's really important for the F&B manager, as an example of, think about how you're laying things out and how you're flowing traffic to prevent anything from going wrong, and putting some signage up to make sure people realize, like, don't go that way, flow back that way.
Right, right. Good points. Now let's move on to the golf course superintendent.
So that one you could take from a lot of different angles, because they have so much responsibility, and all of these are a good example of why the GM themselves has such a tough challenge running a club and also insuring it. You've got 6, 7 different businesses under one roof. So you've got a restaurant you're running over here. A lot of clubs have a fitness center you're running over there, and then golf course itself, they're completely different businesses. That's another one where employee injuries would probably be a big aspect of that. You've got your crew out there that's mowing the fairways and greens, cutting down trees, doing the landscaping. We've seen a number of claims where there's golfers on the course and there's maintenance people also on the course, and they get hit with a golf ball. And so structuring your schedules to prevent potential hazards from happening like that are pretty big. And I know that sounds like something that how could you really control for that? But when you start looking at it from a macro level of seeing 500 country clubs and what injuries have occurred, you can really start to pinpoint best practices that would prevent stuff from going wrong. Another one would be like, I mean, Florida's hot. So in the summers, having some type of buddy system so that you don't have one maintenance worker out on hole 4 by himself. If he has a heat stroke or something, there's nobody there to call for help.
Right, right. Good points. Now, how about the controller, the finance people? What is there an insurance part of insurance that they'd have to be concerned about?
Yeah, for that one, I think a good example would be the contracts that you put in place with any vendors and subcontractors, because the controller has a lot of responsibility with that. Obviously, the invoices and payments, but setting up those agreements when you hire a subcontractor to come in. That's a big one, going back to protecting your insurance, where if you have a contract in place and you hire a sub that has a sufficient certificate of insurance that shows the coverages they have, if something goes wrong, you can go back to those documents and say, that was on your work and your liability, that shouldn't come back to our club. And then for the controller also, really understanding what you bought and why you bought it is pretty critical. Insurance policies are very complex. I think when you were at Law City, we probably had 12 different policies that were in place to cover each different avenue of it. And so the controller really needs to understand how those all come together and why they're there to properly run the club.
And we were a small club, and we had all that going on.
Like a good specific example somebody could pick up on is like a hurricane deductible. That's a big aspect for our clubs down in Florida with wind insurance. So most of our clubs have deductibles of 5%, 7.5%, sometimes up to 10% of all your insured values is that deductible. So for a really large country club, that could be $2, $3, $4 million that your coverage waits to respond to, because it's really in place to protect for a huge catastrophe. So does the controller have a reserve in place that's going to cover that?
Wow.
Or is the plan to assess your membership? You can take it from any avenue, but you want to make sure your members are aware of which avenue you picked.
So if a club has a major disaster and then let's say the deductible's 10%, they'd have to lay out $3-4 million before the insurance kicked in.
Exactly.
Wow.
And that can get tough because for some country clubs, you've got a clubhouse that's worth $30 million, but then the rest of your buildings combine to 10. And so then if we're using that example, 5% deductible on 40 million, that's $2 million. And so a lot of those structures, you could have your maintenance building completely destroyed, but you're not hitting that deductible. And there's different ways you can structure your policy to maybe have it respond quicker, but then you're going to pay more annual premium. And so that's all what the club needs to understand is our risk management model. We have some clubs that go as far as not even buying property insurance at all.
And just to let people at home know, pretty much whenever I had a problem, I called Nick up.
And I think that's so important is for us to have that relationship, because so many things can happen on any day. And if you're communicating, then you can have the peace of mind of knowing that's okay, we're covered, or, oh, that's a problem that I didn't foresee, we need to address that. For instance, like if you were going to have a golf tournament at the club, some insurance policies have exclusions for athletic tournaments. And so you might want to buy a specific one-day policy just to cover that, so that the club doesn't have a coverage issue if one of those guests playing the tournament has some kind of incident.
So if I'm a board member, what do I need to know about insurance, or what's one example to keep it simple?
Board members have a huge responsibility that they probably aren't fully recognizing with the insurance of it, because we always buy a management liability policy that protects your directors and officers. So they have coverage, but if I was a board member, I'd want to understand exactly how much coverage I have, because that's really in place for your negligence. And we've seen claims get as high as a couple $1 million where a board made a bad decision and the membership or a certain individual sued over that decision. So having enough coverage in place to protect you from any unforeseen issues is pretty key. And also empowering your GM and CFO to understand what they're buying and have a relationship with your manager, or with your agent rather. Because we've seen, I think the clubs that I'm fortunate to work with that have the best model have one or two insurance members, somebody that is either actively practicing or is retired, that your equivalent as a GM can use as a resource. Let them come to your pre-renewal meetings and your renewal meetings, oversee what's happening so that they can validate to you whatever your agent's telling you. And also have that trust from the board that, oh, we had a member that understands insurance that gave a sign off on this.
I know for me personally, I studied as hard as I could, but like you said, it's another language, you know? So I deferred to you, your father, our controller, club members with insurance backgrounds, because it wasn't my area of expertise, you know, and that's why it's important, like you were saying, to have a good insurance agent that you trust and you can talk to very easily. You know, we had a good relationship. It was easy to call you up, you know. That was important for me.
On every single day, that you could make a whole plan as a GM for exactly how you're going to go through the day. And then probably by 10 a.m., something's already changed from that plan because a member shows up at your office and wants to have a conversation. It's like, all right, let's have our conversation. And so you don't have time to sit there and know every aspect of how insurance works and how all these policies come together. That's why you hire an agent that can be there to help you.
Yeah, we had one just out of the blue. A guy accused us of being prejudiced the way we enforced the dress code. And he was going to sue. He was going to sue us. You know? So even though we were in the right, we had to act on this, and it went away, but it was a little scary, you know.
Yeah, and that's what's so scary about running a country club is stuff like that can happen completely out of your control. Like you probably didn't even set the rules of what the dress code are. Those are part of the bylaws that the membership set probably a long time ago. And all you're doing is enforcing the rules that were clearly stated, but this guy's angry and so he can threaten to sue. In most states, you can sue and really not have any concern over your own bills for it because the insurance companies are going to pay for it.
So what was your first job ever? Who gave you your first dollar?
So I worked for a sports company in Boynton Beach. It was called Superstar Sports. It was a memorabilia shop, but then they also had a kids program that did different types of athletic training. It was in a lot of ways daycare where kids or parents could drop off their kids for 3-4 hours. But I started working there to do community service in high school. And that just seemed like something that I would enjoy doing. So I was working pro bono for this guy, but working with these kids over the summers, just teaching them football, basketball, hanging out. And then once I hit my community service hours, he's like, Nick, I kind of need you. And so then I worked there through the rest of high school, just weekends, sometimes after school, and then over the summers too. And I really enjoyed that.
So what's one takeaway that you still use today, you think, from learning from that first job?
You know, and it's funny you asked that this week because on Tuesday in our office, we had 20 high school students that are in like a business program that were just shadowing different departments over that day, talking to professionals. And going back to when I was coaching the sports camps, I really enjoy helping younger people figure out how they want their life to go. For the kids playing sports, it was as simple as understanding how to shoot a basketball. But it's pretty inspiring to me when you see a kid that had no form, and no idea what he's doing. And then by the end of the summer, he's draining threes. And then same way with these high school students this week. They're all 18, about to go to college, and that was me 10 years ago. And so I can just give them 5 pieces of advice that I wish I could have told 18-year-old me. And
Right.
you can see the kids kind of really shaking their heads and opening their eyes of, I would have never thought of that, because how could you if you've never lived it? So I really enjoyed helping people in that aspect.
Well, I wish you were around when I was working on my basketball game. A good friend of mine who was my high school golf coach and my high school basketball coach, he cut me from the basketball team. And I told him, I said, Coach, I'm a good outside shooter, right? He says, Leo, we play all our games indoors. Anyway, look, a little lightness to the interview.
Yeah, well, don't get me wrong. I wasn't a good basketball player. I was the guy that was kind of that high IQ, but low skill level. So I was more setting screens, help defense, maybe running some plays, and then hide me in the corner. And then if it's a kick out, I can hit that three.
So you talked about University of Florida. Give us one takeaway you received from the University of Florida. What that you still use today? I'm sure there's lots of them, but give us one.
That's an excellent question. A big takeaway I had was seeing how different every individual is in their upbringings. You know, going through my elementary, middle, high school experiences, most of the people I interacted with had a very similar life experience to me. And so then getting up to University of Florida, there's 50,000 students. Everybody comes from across the state, across the world. And so meeting kids that weren't just South Florida resident that grew up and went to school there, but I had a good friend that was actually a Chinese foreign exchange student. And her name was Moon, or at least that was her English name. And it was so fascinating just talking with her, because this was all normal to me. I grew up in Florida. I grew up going to Gainesville to Gators games, and
Right.
he had a completely different life experience. And that's something that going to UF specifically, but college in general, really showed me.
Interesting. So I'm going to jump around here a little bit.
Yeah, you can
Give
go
me
rapid fire. I'm ready for you.
give me one word that would describe your father. One word.
Wow. Uh, I'd say committed. He was
That's a good
very
word.
committed to whatever he set his mind to. And a lot of that was his career and building a successful business, but committed to his family too. I was lucky enough as a kid that when I was playing sports, dad was usually the head coach or the assistant coach of the team. And I now know, especially doing exactly what he did, that was a lot of time to allocate, especially if practice was at 4 p.m. He had to
Right.
shift the day around working earlier or working after practice to get there. And that was something he really imparted on me, was just being committed to whatever you're really setting your goals for.
Now here's a tough one. The people that you work with, what would be the one word they would use to describe you?
Ooh, that is a good one. Because I really haven't asked that question specifically to know exactly what they think of me.
Take a
Uh,
wild guess. I'm putting you on the spot.
You know, it's a cop-out answer, but I would hope that they have the same feedback I just had from my father of being committed. Uh, a lot of what I do on a day-to-day level is trust in the people you're working with. It's very much a team approach. You knew me as your insurance agent in contact, but through that, I'm working with an actual insurance company that is providing the policies and is reviewing the documents that I'm getting from you and sending over there. On our team, we have account managers that handle a lot of the day-to-day aspects of your insurance. And so it's easy for somebody in my position to not recognize what's happening in all their positions and how it all comes together. And so I'd hope they'd say that I'm very committed too, to the fact that I recognize their challenges and how I can help them, and that I show up every day. It's very easy to hide behind some type of issue you're running through, but if you're not committed to what you're doing, it's not going to go well.
You know, I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and guess what? Committed is a great word. Either you're in or you're out. You know, there's no 50% in and you're committed. You know, you're willing to do whatever it takes basically to get the job done.
And then I'd hope if there was a second one, it'd be something in regards of like fun loving or easygoing. Uh, all aspects of life, but insurance especially is a tough thing. And so if you have a positive attitude towards it and you're happy about what you're doing, it makes it a lot easier to do. It's a very stressful industry, stressful job, but if you allow that to run your life, it's only going to go in a negative direction. So trying to keep a positive spirit is something that's important to me.
So I know you played golf because you invited me a few times and we never played.
Well, and I've got the perfect last name to do golf course insurance with Callaway, you know?
Uh, and that says something about the business too. We wanted to play and we never got together to play. You're a member of the club. I'm a general manager of the club, and we never found the time to get together. Or I never found the time to get together. But when did you start playing golf, Nick?
I started playing when I was about 10 years old with mostly dad, just on weekends. He was a member of a club, so I was able to go with him, just hit around a little bit. In middle school, I got relatively dedicated to it, where I was doing some lessons regularly and playing with a good buddy of mine. But for me and my friend group, most people wanted to play football, basketball, soccer. So I really never got too committed to it, and then tried to join my high school golf team and got cut freshman year, cut sophomore year, cut
Really?
junior year. And then by senior year, I was like, yeah, I'm not making the team. So I was probably leaving college around a 20, 25 handicap. And then now that I do insurance and it's specific to golf courses, there's a lot of opportunities to try to play with people like yourself. And I play a good bit more now. So I'm down to 11 handicap.
Really? Very good. Very
Yeah,
good.
79 for the first time a few weeks ago. So
Congratulations.
yeah, hoping to get better, but as you know, it's a very tough sport. I mean, we could go back to committed as an example. If you're practicing every day, you could get really good at golf. If you're going once a weekend and you're hitting the driving range for 15 minutes and then playing for 4 hours, you're probably going to stay at about the same level for a while.
So you're a member at a country club. It's Delray Dunes Country Club in Boynton Beach, Florida.
Yeah.
We'll go back to that one word question. Give me one word that would describe the ideal staff member of a country club. And you can't use committed.
Yeah, I know that's a tough one. It's a good word to just keep using. I would say respected. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. A lot of service industries don't receive the respect they deserve for the challenges that the individuals running it, whether it's a chef of a restaurant, the GM of a restaurant, the waiter. Most people just expect I'm a paying customer and I want whatever I'm asking for. And so I would hope that members of clubs respect both the management teams and then all of the staff members themselves, because that's where you'll see, because I, again, work with about 40 clubs. So there's some that have staff members that have been there 15, 20, 25 years. And so you have to just know from that they appreciate being there, and membership and leadership teams respect their efforts and work.
You know, you just hit on something that you reminded me of something. Because you do go to 40 or 50 clubs, you have a lot of information. And you're very good about keeping everybody anonymous. But I would ask you questions basically saying, hey, how we doing compared to everybody else? And it was a good feedback, you know? And I remember during COVID, you know, every decision we made was questioned, you know? But So the feedback from you, hey Leo, you're doing better than most clubs, and that made me feel good, because there was a lot of pressure on our team at that time to make sure we did everything the right way, because it's like a balancing act. The people that wanted it real strict, and the people that didn't want any rules or regulations at all, and we were stuck in the middle. But it was good having the feedback from you all about what was going on in the industry.
And it's so tough for a country club to have a specific metric to grade yourself on because most businesses, their profitability matters a good bit, where the clubs are nonprofits. So it's not about making as much money as you can, as much as delivering the best membership experience. And you can only really know your results from feedback, surveys, hearing what people are saying, but there's really no grading system. So for you running your club, every day is just a new day of how can we do the best that we can. And using those kind of industry feedback can only help.
So what's the main reason that you're a member of the Delray Dunes Club?
I'd say it's because of the club's culture itself. It's a relatively smaller club, capped at 350 members. And there's a lot of clubs that go up 1,000+ members. And it's very family tied. So both the Callaway family, but there's probably 10, 15 others that have 2, 3, the longest is 4 generations of
Wow.
that family as a member of the club.
Wow.
And it changes from time to time, and not every member is a legacy member like that. But it's a cool culture. Like Bob Murphy, if you know that name, he was a U.S. amateur star back in the 60s, and then he was a pro for a while and then a commentator on NBC. He was one of the founding members of Delray Dunes with a handful of other guys. Bob's still a member of the club. You see him there for dinner if you go up. And so that's really cool. And he's had children that have lived there and grandkids that come by. And so it's a really cool experience being there where you see all these different generations. And a guy like Bob is a great example. He could be arrogant if he wanted to. He was extremely successful and a well-known guy. But when you see him at Delray Dunes, that's just Bob Murphy, my buddy.
Right, right. So Bob Murphy, I grew up in a town called West Sayville, New York. It's on Long Island.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to play golf at the West Sayville golf course, about 3 blocks from where our house was. And I remember as a little boy on the driving range, I'm watching this guy hit balls, and he was not hitting on the mats, by the way. And his arms were like sledgehammers, and he was like a short, stocky guy. And a short, stocky guy had a very upright golf swing, which is unusual. And it was Bob Murphy. And I think either his mother or his mother-in-law lived in my hometown. And every now and then he would show up at our driving range to practice. It was pretty wild,
It's such a small world that of all names I could have just dropped on you, he
Yeah.
had family from where you were from and you knew him to some
And
extent.
all of us kids, we'd all watch from like 40, 50 yards away. And like it was like watching Mickey Mantle take batting practice,
And if I remember correct, I think Bob was a baseball player and then relatively late in his sporting career switched over to playing golf. Like I don't think he was a youth golfer. It was more late high school, college that he started playing. And then he just hit the ground running. I want to say 1966 U.S. amateur champion, Bob Murphy.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah,
Could be
I heard he's a good
around there.
He's a good pool player too, so he's probably got great hand-eye coordination.
Definitely. But that's something that's just a cool part of being at Delray Dunes, is having relationships with somebody like that. Just last year was the 50th anniversary of the club and therefore the member guest, so they renamed it the Murph after Bob.
That's great. That's great. You mentioned a family. One family's got 4 generations at Delray Dunes.
Yeah, there's it's the Olivella family. So there's the grandparents that I know well, and then they have kids that are a little older than me, and then they now have their kids. But then the great grandmother of the Olivellas still live out there too. So they've got 4 generations.
Wow, that's pretty cool. I'm running out of questions here, Nick. So if you, because you're around a lot of clubs, you're around a lot of staff, what would be some advice you'd give to a 21-year-old starting out in the club industry?
I would say expose yourself to as much as you can within the club industry. If you're on the golf side, spend some time with the F&B department and see if you could help out, and then vice versa. Because for a lot of young golf professionals, you want to figure out what your real goals are. And if the goal is to be somebody in your shoes as a general manager, you've got to understand all aspects of it. I mean, you came more from the golf side of things, and then at some point in your career, you were overseeing the food and beverage operation too. And so if you could start from a young age, exposing yourself there and getting experience, it's only going to help you with both your department and what you're running and picking up best practices from over there and having the knowledge as you continue to progress.
And you know what? That's great advice, and it's simple advice, but most people don't take it, because if you're 21 years old, you a couple of years in the golf operations, couple of years in golf course maintenance, couple of years in food and beverage, couple of years maybe even in accounting, you got a pretty good background. By the time you're 30 years old, you're pretty valuable. Great advice. Great advice. How's your father doing anyway?
Oh, Pops is doing fantastic. Uh, it's been a little over 3 years since he had a stroke, and most studies you read say you get about 6 months to a year of recovery, and then that's really where you're going to be. And in those first 12 months, Dad did fantastic. When he came home, he really wasn't able to walk. His left side was pretty dormant. Within a year, he was able to walk without a cane or walker. He never lost any speech aspects, but then he's continued to progress since then. So now he golfs 2 to 3 times a week. He's joined a group out at Delray Dunes, and he's able to play a full golf game where he's hitting every club, he's hitting every shot. And that was something that we were told probably would never happen for him again.
Wow.
And that wasn't told to us as a negative as much as just kind of expectation setting. It was a significant injury he had, and to see him go this far is great. So next week, we've got a little road trip planned where we're visiting some of the clubs we work with that aren't in our immediate area. And so Dad's coming with us, and it's going to be great.
So he's not in full retirement mode yet.
Exactly.
He's
I
still
like to
still
think that
working.
we've pulled off a pretty smooth semi-retirement for him, where he lets me, and then I've got a partner at CBIZ, Mike Sauer, that we handle pretty much the full day-to-day aspects of running the club team operation. So Dad didn't have to worry about being on his emails every day and attending the meetings that are kind of in between, as much as come for the renewal meetings, be there for the relationships, and get to do the stuff he enjoys. So, we were always big partners of the Florida Club Managers Association. Dad has both conferences set on his summer schedule. He's going to be there.
And he's got all that experience too, man. It would be tough to pass up all that wisdom.
And something I really appreciated watching Dad, and what I try to embody also, is the relationships he had with the people he worked with. A lot of the GMs and CFOs that he represented were also friends of his. So a lot of going to those conferences is to see your colleagues and catch up. And so that's really what his interest in going there is. And I try to do the same thing.
Well, Nick, this has been great, and it should be obvious to anybody listening or watching this that you're a great guy. It just makes doing business hell of a lot easier. And best of luck to you in the future. Tell everybody over at Delray Dunes I said hello. Tell your father I said hello. And maybe we'll make this an annual podcast. We'll just review, see what's going on in the insurance business.
I would absolutely love that, Leo. It's great to talk to you. I appreciate the kind words. I do have one question for you. What's been the best experience you've had since you've moved over across the pond?
The cost of living is unbelievable. I came here as a poor Irishman, Irish American, and now I'm a wealthy Thai because of the exchange rate.
Uh-huh.
The people are really nice, and it's a different culture. It's not it's not America. America, and it's not a knock, but America's a very competitive society. It's dog eat dog and the rat race and the whole 9 yards, which I enjoy. I'm a very competitive person. But now that I'm retired, this culture, they work to enjoy themselves. They're not a lot of them are working to get ahead. They're hard workers, but they're not trying to climb the ladder, if that makes any sense.
100%.
Yeah, they're just trying to get a paycheck so they can enjoy their life. But they work hard. It's not that they're lazy. They're hard workers. And it's very safe. I mean, there is no crime that I can see in Thailand. You can walk around the streets any time of the day or night, and nobody's going to bother you. And I live in a pretty populated area. It's a tourist town.
Uh-huh.
I've been to Bangkok. Bangkok is very safe. Maybe it's the jails in Bangkok. No, I mean Thailand. Nobody wants to go to jail, so
Uh-huh.
nobody breaks the law. I mean, I don't want to go to a jail in Thailand. That's for damn sure. So I'm going to be walking a straight and narrow road. But it's a great place. The people are nice, and like they have every chance to take advantage of me because I have no idea what the hell I'm doing here. Like lots of times they'll give me change back. No, you messed up. You only owe us this much, and they're just nice people. And I'm glad I'm here. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, that's fantastic to hear. We touched on it a bit before we jumped on the podcast. The international business was the degree I was in. And so it was much in a business context, but we studied different cultures. And I went to Vietnam through the program. So it's cool hearing you validate some of the things that we were taught in school about how the cultural differences apply, where a lot of Western culture is very much based on advancement and success, where their priorities are a little bit different over there.
And you know what, too? Like,
lots here.
There's stereotypes too. Like, I'll go somewhere and I tell them I'm from Florida. Oh, alligator, alligator. I said I lived in Florida quite a few decades. I never saw an alligator in person. But they think Florida is alligators crawling up the walls in Florida.
Uh-huh.
So there's different stereotypes that are blown out of proportion by the media or whatever.
And have you started learning Thai at all?
I know how to say hello is Swati Krop, and thank you is Kop Kun Krop. And that's the extent of it so far. Oh, Nitnoy's a little bit.
Okay.
Because I'll ask the caddy, does it break left or right to left? Nitnoy, little bit.
That's cool. So you're able to go through life without knowing too much Thai, and it's not a problem for you?
Well, that's the thing. Again, I'm in a resort area, or I go to Bangkok, and most people know a little bit of English, enough to get by. And with this Google Translator now, it's pretty easy to communicate with people. But most people where I go speak a little bit of English, and it's enough to get by. And there's a lot of Westerners here, a lot of Americans, Canadians, England, Australians, New Zealand, Ireland. So there's a lot of English speaking people here.
Yeah, I'll tell you a brief story. It's funny you mentioned Google Translate, because when I was in Vietnam, we're mostly in the populated cities, Ho Chi Minh, Hanoi. So most everybody can speak enough English that I was able to get by. But through just kind of our different travel experiences, we were hanging out with a group of French students. And so I whipped out Google Translate and had a full conversation with this girl where I would just type in English and then she would check my phone and she was seeing the French and we'd go back and forth. It's amazing what technology is able to do nowadays.
Yeah, so I think I said I go to Alcoholics Anonymous meetings every day. and it's all English speaking people from all over the world. And one day, this Russian guy shows up, and he raises his hand. Okay, I think his name was Alexei, and he starts sharing in Russian, and it sounds like he's mad.
Uh-huh.
Like blah, 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 blah. So I put on Google Translate, and he's just getting his, he's just sharing.
Yeah.
And he's saying he likes to be able to come to the meeting. He wishes he could speak English, and he enjoys being here. But to listen to the guy talk, you would think he wanted to start World War III.
Uh-huh.
But Google Translate, he was just like anybody else.
Yeah. One of these days, they're going to have the tech so advanced that it'll translate automatically, where you could like put in an earpiece or something and it'll come right through as English. We're not too far away from that.
Yeah, yeah. So it was cool. When he got done talking, I said, because I'm sitting right next to the guy with my Google Translate on, and I stated back what he said in English. And after the meeting was over, the people are coming to me, Leo, you know how to speak Russian? I said, no, I have my Google Translate on. Oh, okay.
Don't give away all your secrets.
But on that note, Nick, we'll hang it up till next time we talk. And have a great day, and thank you for coming on today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This was awesome. Great way to start the day. Hopefully, great way for you to end the day. And
All right.
I'll keep watching, and then maybe a year from now or so, we could have another follow up.
Sounds good. Thank you, Nick.
Awesome. Great to see you, my
Bye-bye.
man.
Bye-bye.